Hey, everybody. I want to welcome you to this episode. So, basically, what I want to do is dissect Kevin Donovan's book, The Billionaire Murders. Firstly, it's a wonderful piece. I think it gives us a lot of insights. You can tell that this man has been out there having a lot of interviews and discussing the topic with a lot of stakeholders. It's just a matter of, us trying to understand who those stakeholders are. And we know and respect that he can't share who they are necessarily, but Kevin's got some really interesting insight into this murder. And one of the funny things about the audiobook, at least, is that Kevin changes his voice whenever it's somebody else and a quote that he's utilizing. And sometimes he gets really gritty and he speaks like that. And at other moments, when he's speaking on behalf of somebody else with a softer voice, he does this. But nonetheless, great book. I think that one of the most important things about this book is that it highlights the family. And I'm not sure if it's Kevin Donovan getting retribution for the fact that the family is being awfully silent and not giving Kevin actually the interviews that he's hoping for. But he really does focus in on Jonathan Sherman. And one of the moments that he highlights is when he's at the courthouse and it's Detective Yim and him in the hallway. They're talking about their families. And Detective Yim alludes to the fact that Jonathan has a green storage company out east somewhere. And it was almost as if Kevin Donovan is highlighting the fact that there's some sort of transaction that took place between green storage and the potential killer or something like that. It really came out of nowhere and was unexpected. And seemingly so, it seems that it was unexpected for Kevin Donovan as well when Detective Yim brought that up. So I think that there's something here that the family is, they could be in a little bit of trouble. And, other people talk about the murder and they say, well, then why would the Sherman family put $10 million up? And why would they say, why would they put it in a situation of hiring, private investigators if they were perhaps culpable in the murder themselves? So firstly, is it all of them that would be implicated? Not necessarily. Secondly, maybe it's a genius play to have $10 million rewarded to somebody that solves the crime, but also have the top detectives and lawyers working on the case. We can already see that Greenspan is deflecting everything that he can to protect the family. So really, you've got the top lawyer working on your behalf rather than working against you. Not necessarily that would be the situation that Greenspan would be working against the family ever, but you've got the best working on your behalf rather than against you. And you've got the top, non-police detectives working on your behalf rather than against you. I actually sent an email out to the private detectives at one point, and I just said, look, I think maybe there's an opportunity here to utilize video. And, they came back to me and said, well, the family's not going to be a part of this in any sort of way. And it's really interesting to me that the family, for the most part, is staying silent. It seems like, I believe it's Mary, the sister, is willing to speak to investigators and pass along any pertinent information. And I believe Alex, the daughter, is doing so as well. And Alex is the one that sent over the photographs of the new grandchildren over to Honey the day of the murders, or the day after the murders, rather. They don't know exactly the timeline. But some of the family is coming forward and giving information, and some of the family is not. And I find that really interesting that the family would choose to do so. So if you're guilty, what do you do? Well, if you're guilty, you say that you're actually not a part of it in any sort of way, right? If you're guilty, you say that you were not, you're not talking to the media. You're not willing to speak to the media. And I just noticed that we have one viewer here. That's cool. Hi, how are you? And you would shut down the investigation. You would not answer any questions. And not only that, Jonathan Sherman is actually saying for any questions to go to him, they have to go through the police detectives as well. So Detective Yim, for example, is a part of an email chain where Kevin Donovan from the Billionaire Murders has to actually send emails through with questions to, which I find very interesting. I'm sorry, but if my parents were murdered, I would be all over the news. And I wouldn't try to say that the media is bad in any sort of way. I would try to utilize the media as a way to push the investigation forward, but I would work with them. I wouldn't silence them. I would only silence if I felt guilty. So I think that this is, I think it's very interesting what Kevin Donovan has done within this book. It's a very slow start in the book, to the point where I was thinking, why all this history? Why are you doing this? And then I started to realize he has this one chapter where he talks about the likely scenarios. And, it talks about sort of the leaving of Apotex the day before, when, they're talking to the architects and the home designers for this new home that they're having built. So Honey goes home first. And as Honey arrives at the side door, she goes inside. And then the theory is that is where they grabbed her and they took her downstairs or whatever it was. But she was grabbed in a way that the cell phone that she was holding dropped to the ground in the powder room and was actually never retrieved or moved again. And they believe that was part of the struggle that Honey Sherman was having with the attackers. So she's taking, and my thought would be that she's taken down to the pool area and tied and held as the killers lie in wait for Barry to come home. And it's very odd, right? It's very interesting to think about this. Like, you'd have to say to yourselves that, these killers knew about the timeline. And not only that, Donovan highlights a very important fact, that there was a camera. There's a camera in the pool area. A camera in the pool area that could have been on, but it wasn't connected. So the wires were not connected on the camera. And I would say to myself, okay, if I'm the killer and I don't know if there's a camera that's connected, I'm certainly not going to be anywhere near a camera. It would almost be like this. If I don't know the setup of the house, maybe I'm dragging Honey into the pool area. You're darn right, I'd look and see a camera and go, oh my, there's a camera there. I can't go in there. But this killer had the fortitude to actually not worry about the camera, disregard it completely, and then tie up Honey to the railing or whatever was done. We don't know, obviously, but to feel safe within a pool area. It's the only area in the house that has a camera as well. And it just turns out that camera doesn't work. That, to me, tells me that A, the killer knew that the camera wasn't working because Jonathan or somebody told them that it wasn't working, or B, they're just absolutely silly and could see that the wires were not connected, which doesn't even make sense to me, because I'm just not going to go, if you look at a camera, you're not going to look to the details to whether it's connected or not. So that, to me, is very odd and tells me that somebody knows the details about this house, intimate details about this house. And then the next day they're talking about, certain people on the cameras that were going in and out on Thursday. There was this one gentleman over the course of an hour that was seemingly either in the house or knocking on the front door for 29 minutes. And the problem is, though, I think that they missed out on the footage on the neighbor's camera from Wednesday, and which means that neighbor's camera, it elapsed over 7 days, I believe it was. So I believe that the investigators missed out on their opportunity to get Wednesday's footage. And if they had Wednesday's footage, they could have seen maybe people walking in the house, a car pulling up or something. But from what I'm understanding, they missed out on that opportunity. So all in all, I would say that the police have definitely made progress within the murders, and you can tell because Kevin Donovan actually alludes to this. Kevin Donovan says in his book that Detective Yim, on the witness stand, when he's talking to Detective Yim says, yes, we are making progress. And some people are even saying that the progress is to such an extent that the case will actually be solved very soon. And my understanding is that in October, they were waiting on more evidence to come through. So the Judge Pringle actually gave approval for executive orders, or whatever the actual statement is, what they're called. She gave the approval, and then they went to the entities, the companies. A company could be TD Bank, BMO, could be Google, Facebook, you name it. And that data that's coming back evidently should hold a lot of weight towards this case. So that tells me that the initial orders that were given for data that was retrieved, and then this second set, there's some sort of expectation for this second set of data. And the second set of data uh, seemingly will actually hold enough evidence to be able to perhaps put somebody in jail. And as I said on December 22nd with the video that I did, I believe that the Shermans were murdered, but I had no idea that the investigation was going to turn to somebody closely related to them. And another thing that Kevin Donovan alludes to is he talks about sort of the issues between Jonathan and Honey and Barry. And supposedly in 2015, Barry was told by Jonathan, "Look, I don't think that you're managing the finances for the household properly." And then Jonathan actually reached out to the sisters to say, "Look, I think that we can remove him from the head as the founder of this company because he's handling the finances incorrectly. And there's some sort of level of incompetence that might be there." And supposedly, with a level of incompetence, even from a founder, you can derail them from having ownership or control over the funds. And it looks like Jonathan was going down that road, but it was shut down, I believe, by the sisters. And now Jonathan finds himself maybe in a situation where there's only one other option. But the question is, can you actually be that greedy and entitled to think that it's okay to erase your family? Do you think that it's okay to do that? And I would venture that it's possible. Jonathan turns out was adopted, and there's obviously nothing wrong with that. But maybe that created a set of separation that allows him to think this way, where it all becomes about money. Again, he was having issues with Honey, and clearly, supposedly after the fact, now there's a lot of internal turmoil amongst the Sherman kids, and sometimes they're talking, sometimes they're not. So the question is Jonathan able to actually execute on something like this? And there's several facts to point to, this possibility. It is known that Barry Sherman wanted some sort of succession plan for Apotex. It is known that Jack Kay was a staunch supporter of, taking his time with Apotex and allowing the legacy of Apotex to live on, where the workers were taken care of. Any sort of plans to sell the company were planned over years, whatever it would take. But there had to be a methodical approach. And it looks like, if you analyze the information, Jonathan got in there within 2 months of the deaths of Barry and Honey, and Apotex was up for sale within 2 months. Why? That's not the vision of Barry. The vision that Barry had was to allow the workers to be, happy and taken care of, and have some sort of say within the future of Apotex. That was not Barry's vision. Would you not want Barry's vision to be executed as a child of Barry? Would you not want that to be accounted for? I would. I would say that Barry was treated poorly when it came to the execution of Apotex's future and being put up for sale. I think that was a slight, and also a hint at what the plan was, because again, it shouldn't be done that way. Next, we actually have an understanding that Jonathan Sherman went around and was trying to say that Apotex, the murder of Barry, actually had something to do with Jack Kay. So you have Jonathan Sherman saying that Jack Kay had something to do with the murder, and yet Jack Kay is like the loving friend that would do anything for Apotex and had no reason to kill Barry. So that again is another slight, and it seems like, maybe it's tough for Jonathan to face Jack every day. Maybe it's tough to have conversations with Jack. And the reality is Jack Kay was actually one of the executors on the estate. And I think that there was another change that was coming to the estate and who the executors were that was never able to be realized. There was a change in 2017 that happened. I wonder, was that change to bring Jack Kay on board? Did that upset Jonathan to the point that he was losing control? What was that change to the executor management levels that really upset Jonathan. I don't know. But the fact that he's going out there and saying that Jack had something to do with the murders is just absolutely despicable and could actually implicate Jonathan. So, going back to the evidence at hand, we have a lot that could say that Jonathan had something to do with this. And Kevin Donovan, when Kevin Donovan was, talking about the eulogy that Jonathan gave, Jonathan says something that really is highlighted by Kevin, and I believe it. And he says, the two of you are not suffering the way that we are now. Okay. How would he know that? Unless, he got either a text message that said their lives were ended quickly and it was easy. And B, why would you ever say that? Because your parents had just passed away within the last week. And here you are giving a eulogy that states that they didn't suffer as much as you were suffering. That's a level of comparison that I don't think is necessary unless, you feel that there's something that happened. The other thing that I noticed when I'm watching the eulogy and we have Jonathan Sherman up there speaking, you can't get the whole thing on video. I didn't notice the whole thing, but his eyes are very shifting, almost in a worried sense. So I went out and I compared it to other eulogies. There was a eulogy done for somebody for Princess Diana, and I was watching the eulogy just to see how their eye movements were. And it's actually sincere. There's no twitching or movements or doubt. But Jonathan Sherman, when he's giving his eulogy, you literally see him do this quickly a few times and this, and he's shifty, almost out of fear, almost out of looking out to see if the police are there. And then the fact that Mary was on stage giving her eulogy, but I didn't see Jonathan as a part of that. There was a separation there. And it looks to me like Jonathan Sherman is having issues facing the family of Honey. And it looks to me like Jonathan Sherman is shutting out the world because he's having issues with what has transpired. So I don't know what the end result here is. Did Jonathan Sherman actually kill his parents? But I would venture to guess that the evidence is starting to pile up. And now they're trying to link green storage and maybe some financial transactions to the people that maybe committed the murder. Because again, there would have been a lot of money that was moved around in order to accommodate those murders. And as we know, the murders themselves were weak. The fact I still don't understand how the Toronto police, went to say that it was a murder-suicide. And here you are with belts holding these two individuals up and their hands tied behind their back by jackets, not necessarily tied behind their back, but how were their jackets actually pulled down behind their backs if they killed themselves? That alone suggests otherwise. Why would Barry have his legs crossed in front of him, right? Why would Barry have his glasses on almost perfectly if he had killed Honey and then himself? And the reality is that the wounds to Honey's face were put there by the killers to make it seem like Barry did it. And now that suggests because the wounds were put there on Barry's face to make it seem like Barry had actually instigated those wounds, it then tells you that this was a murder for profit, not just by the killers, but I would say that it suggests that it was a murder for profit from somebody that is close to the family and somebody that